"Excuse me." A voice rang out across my private dock, sharp and commanding. The woman's oversized sun visor quivered with the weight of her self-importance. "You can't fish there without a permit from the HOA." I calmly reeled in a hefty 6-pound largemouth bass, lifted my sunglasses, and took in the sight before me. A woman perched on a mobility scooter, a laminated HOA enforcement volunteer badge pinned to her neon vest. "Ma'am," I replied, placing the fish in my cooler, "not only do I have every permit the state of Georgia requires, but I also own this entire lake." Her jaw worked up and down, speechless, before she reversed her scooter a few inches, as if hoping the ground would swallow her up. But her face quickly hardened, the look of someone who'd never admitted fault in her life. "That's impossible," she declared, as if she personally tracked every deed in the county. "This is Silver Pines Community Lake, and I am Patricia Blackwood, president of the Silver Pines Homeowners Association. My name is Robert Garrison, and I'm a quiet man by nature. After 30 years as a wildlife conservation officer and 2 divorces, I thought my biggest challenge would be keeping herons away from my trout. When I inherited 40 acres of forest and a private, spring-fed lake from my late Uncle Theodore, I thought I'd found my own slice of heaven. No neighbors, no drama, just me in the outdoors. Then the subdivision arrived. Silver Pines luxury homes sprang up on the neighboring land like mushrooms after rain. The developer, a slick-talking guy from Atlanta, ran out of waterfront lots and started advertising my lake as a community amenity. Their glossy brochures even featured photos of my dock, promising world-class fishing at Silver Pines Lake. I should have sued them on the spot, but instead, I put up a few private property signs and hoped common sense would prevail. I'd never met anyone quite like Patricia Blackwood. According to neighborhood gossip, she once fined a resident $200 for leaving their trash cans out 37 minutes past the allowed time. She measured grass with a ruler every Sunday and installed cameras to monitor mailbox compliance. The first sign of trouble came when I found a laminated notice zip-tied to my dock. "Attention! This lake is now under Silver Pines HOA jurisdiction. All fishing requires board approval and a $75 monthly access fee. Non-compliance will result in fines and legal action." I left the notice as evidence and went about my day. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived, claiming I owed $150 in back lake fees and a $50 penalty. My response was simple. I mailed them a copy of the county plat map with my property lines highlighted, my deed, and a polite note suggesting they update their records. Patricia's reply came via email. Subject line, your continued defiance. She accused me of being uncooperative and threatened to report me to the Department of Natural Resources for suspicious fishing practices. She also claimed several residents had complained that my casting disturbed their morning yoga, despite the fact that the nearest subdivision property was a quarter-mile away. Things escalated when I installed trail cameras after finding footprints near my boat launch. The footage showed Patricia leading lake safety inspection tours every Tuesday and Thursday at dawn, clipboard in hand, pointing at my dock and making notes. One morning, I found they'd installed their own sign in front of mine, Silver Pines Community Lake, recreational use by HOA permit only. Violators will be prosecuted. I removed their sign, photographed it, and replaced it with a bigger one. Private property, Garrison Lake. Est, 1952. Trespassers will be prosecuted. That night, someone spray-painted "selfish" across my sign. In hot pink dot, the real showdown came on a foggy Thursday in October. I walked down to my dock, coffee in hand, to find Patricia had set up a full command post, folding table, banner reading HOA Lake Permit Checkpoint, 2 directors' chairs, and a cash box. 3 board members flanked her, all in matching vests labeled Lake Patrol. One had a clipboard, another a tablet, and the third was photographing my boat. "Good morning, Mr. Garrison," Patricia said, her smile icy. "We're conducting mandatory boat safety inspections and permit checks. The fee is $25 for residents, $50 for non-residents. Since you refuse to join the HOA, you're a non-resident." I set my tackle box down. "Patricia, you're trespassing. You have 5 minutes to clear out before I call the sheriff." She actually laughed, waving the stack of papers. "I have a petition signed by 137 Silver Pines residents declaring this lake a community resource. The HOA board voted to assume management." "Did you vote on whether the earth is flat too?" I asked, pulling out my phone. "Because your vote doesn't change reality." While Patricia launched into a speech about community solidarity, I made 2 calls. First to my attorney, Margaret Chen, a property law expert and fishing buddy to 3 county judges. Second to my nephew Jackson, a conservation ranger with the Georgia DNR. Margaret advised me to document everything and avoid confrontation. Jackson said he'd be there in 20 minutes. With backup. Patricia was still lecturing when 2 DNR trucks pulled up. Jackson stepped out in uniform, followed by his supervisor, Captain William Reeves, a man who looked like he could bench press a canoe. "Morning, Uncle Rob," Jackson said, then turned to Patricia. "Ma'am, I'm Ranger Garrison with the Department of Natural Resources. I need to see your permit for operating a commercial enterprise on state-regulated waterfront." Patricia's face turned several shades of red. "This isn't commercial. We're a homeowners association conducting official business." Captain Reeves pulled out his clipboard. "Are you collecting fees?" "Well, yes, but on property you don't own," he finished. "Ma'am, you can't claim land. Like you're planting a flag on the moon. This lake and the surrounding property belong to Robert Garrison. You're in violation of Georgia Code, the 21st of July 16, criminal trespass." Patricia tried to argue the lake was a public waterway, but Captain Reeves explained that, even if it were, which it wasn't, the shore and dock were indisputably private. What happened next was almost poetic. Jackson wrote trespass citations for all 4 HOA board members. Captain Reeves added charges for operating without a vendor's permit and illegally collecting fees. He also cited them for violating federal wetland protection laws by driving stakes into the ground for their banner. Patricia demanded to speak to their supervisor. Captain Reeves smiled. "Ma'am, I am the supervisor. Would you like to speak to the Attorney General instead?" While the board members frantically made phone calls, Jackson helped me dismantle their checkpoint, photographing everything for evidence. Patricia refused to leave her chair until her lawyer arrived. When he did, a nervous man in an ill-fitting suit, he took one look and whispered urgently to Patricia. Her face went from red to white in seconds. They packed up and left Patricia, declaring, "This isn't over. My legal team will be in touch." The cash box, I noticed, contained $300 in permit fees collected from residents that morning. Captain Reeves suggested they return the money unless they wanted fraud charges added. Next few weeks were a blur of legal threats. Patricia's lawyer sent letters. Margaret responded with property law citations dating back to the 1800s. The HOA held emergency meetings where Patricia reportedly compared me to various dictators. Then came the forensic surveyor's report. Patricia had hired him, hoping to find a loophole. Instead, he discovered not only did I own the lake, but the developer had built 6 houses partially on my land. Their surveyors had misread the boundary markers. Suddenly, I held all the cards. Those 6 homeowners faced the possibility of having to demolish parts of their homes or pay me for the encroachment. Margaret suggested a settlement. I'd grant easements for the encroaching properties in exchange for a permanent, legally binding agreement that the HOA had no authority over my land, water, or activities. They'd also pay my legal fees and publish a formal apology in their newsletter. 5 of the 6 homeowners agreed immediately. The 6th was Patricia, whose master suite extended 8 feet onto my land. She held out for 3 weeks, trying every tactic, claiming adverse possession. which failed, as she'd only lived there 2 years. Arguing the lake was an attractive nuisance, her lawyer called that ridiculous. And even trying to get the county to declare eminent domain, they laughed her out of the office. Finally, facing bankruptcy, from mounting legal bills and the risk of losing her home, Patricia caved, but not before one last act. The night before the settlement signing, someone dumped 5 gallons of bright blue pool dye into my lake. The security cameras I'd installed after the checkpoint incident caught everything. Patricia, in full camo, dragging containers marked "Pool Shock" to the water's edge. What she didn't know was that Jackson had installed underwater cameras for a fish study. The footage showed her pouring chemicals directly into a spawning bed for protected species. The next morning, Patricia arrived at Margaret's office to find Captain Reeves waiting with an arrest warrant. The charges: criminal damage to property, violation of the Clean Water Act, and destruction of protected wildlife habitat. As she was led away in handcuffs, she screamed that I'd ruined everything and that Silver Pines would never recover. That evening, the HOA board held an emergency election. Patricia lost her presidency in a landslide 208-1. The only vote in her favor was from her husband, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. The new president, a retired teacher named David Morrison, showed up at my dock the next morning with a fruit basket and a handwritten apology. He promised the HOA would never bother me again, and even offered to pay for lake restoration if they dye had caused any damage. It hadn't. Jackson explained that, while Patricia's stunt was illegal, the amount of dye in a 20-acre lake was negligible. The fish didn't even notice. Patricia's legal troubles, however, were just beginning. The federal charges alone carried fines up to $25,000 per violation. The state added their own penalties. Her homeowner's insurance refused to cover criminal acts, and her husband filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Last I heard, she was sentenced to 200 hours of community service cleaning public lakes, 3 years probation, and fines totaling $48,000. When the judge read the sentence, she fainted in court and had to be revived with smelling salts. That, my friends, is how I learned that sometimes the best way to protect your peace and your property is to stand your ground and let the law and a little karma do the rest.